Governor, I want you to meet someone. Her name is Jennifer. She's in the audience tonight. Vice President J.D. Vance's voice cut through the debate hall like a scalpel. Calm, controlled, but with an edge that made everyone lean forward. The kind of voice that signals something important is about to happen. Gavin Newsom froze for just a second, maybe less, but the cameras caught it. The perfectly styled hair, the rehearsed smile, the practiced confidence that had carried him through years of California politics and countless television appearances. All of it stopped because he had no idea who Jennifer was. And 40 million people watching at home were about to find out. The CNN town hall stage in Los Angeles was bathed in harsh television lights. October 23, 2025. A special California Crisis Forum that CNN had organized as California's problems reached a breaking point. Homelessness at record levels, crime surging, a mass exodus of residents and businesses. Newsom had agreed to face critics to answer tough questions to show he could defend his record. What he hadn't expected was that one of those critics would be the Vice President of the United States. Vance had flown in from Washington specifically for this. When CNN invited him to participate as a national perspective on California's challenges, his team had seen the opportunity immediately. Newsom was vulnerable. His approval ratings were tanking, and Vance had spent 2 months collecting evidence of every failure, every hypocrisy, every broken promise. They'd been going at it for 2 hours already. Newsom had come to defend California, to argue that the criticism was overblown, that the state was still thriving. Vance had come to systematically destroy that narrative. And for the past 2 hours, he'd been doing exactly that. Methodically, relentlessly, round after round of evidence that couldn't be spun away. But this was different. This wasn't about statistics or policy debates. This was about to become intensely, undeniably personal. The camera found her. Row 7, left side of the audience, a woman in her early 50s, thin in a way that spoke of missed meals rather than yoga studios, wearing clothes that were clean but worn. Her face lined with the kind of exhaustion that comes from sleeping on concrete, from never feeling safe, from years of struggling just to survive. She stood slowly, her hands trembling slightly. Jennifer, Dana Bash, the CNN moderator, looked confused. This wasn't in the agreed-upon format. They were supposed to be wrapping up, but she didn't stop it. Nobody stopped it, because everyone in that hall could feel it. Something real was about to break through all the political posturing. Governor Newsom. Jennifer's voice was quiet at first, shaking, but the microphones caught every syllable. You don't know me, but I know you. I used to live 3 blocks from your house in San Francisco. Pacific Heights, beautiful neighborhood. Newsom's face had already arranged itself into his empathy expression. The slight head tilt, the concerned eyes, the softened voice, the look he'd practiced 1,000 times for town halls and photo ops with constituents in crisis. I'm so sorry to hear about your situation. I was a teacher. Jennifer's voice got stronger, cutting through his practiced sympathy like it wasn't even there. 5th grade, Monroe Elementary in the Sunset District. I taught for 17 years. I loved those kids. I loved my job. When COVID hit in 2020, I got furloughed. Budget cuts. Then in 2021, they laid me off permanently. I couldn't pay my rent on unemployment benefits. By 2022, I lost my apartment. I ended up on the streets. The hall was completely silent now. You could hear the air conditioning humming through the vents. Could hear someone's phone buzz on silent mode. Could hear Newsom swallow hard. Jennifer kept going, her voice steady now, clear, each word landing like a hammer. I've been homeless in San Francisco for 3.5 years. 3.5 years, Governor. While you've been in office, I've tried to get help. I've gone to the shelters. They're full, dangerous, or both. I've called the hotlines you set up. I've filled out applications for housing assistance. They tell me there are waiting lists, 2 years long, 3 years long. They tell me to keep checking back. Meanwhile, I sleep in doorways. I've been beaten up twice. Had my backpack stolen 4 times. Everything I owned. Last winter, I almost died from pneumonia. She paused, let that sink in, then looked directly at Newsom with eyes that had nothing left to lose. And you walked past me twice. I wasn't invisible. You saw me. The silence that followed felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. I was sleeping in a doorway, on your street. Your actual street, Governor. Pacific Heights, Filbert Street. This was last year, November, evening time around 7. You were coming out of your house. You were dressed up, expensive-looking suit. You were talking on your phone. You walked right past me. You looked down at me for maybe 1 second. We made eye contact. And then you stepped around me and kept walking. Newsom opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Jennifer wasn't done. Her voice got even stronger. The second time was 2 weeks later. I saw you getting out of a car near a restaurant in Napa, the French Laundry. I'd taken the bus up there. Someone told me there was a shelter with openings. There wasn't. I was sitting on the sidewalk about half a block from the restaurant. You walked past me with a group of people, all dressed up, laughing. You glanced at me and kept walking. You went inside that restaurant, and I slept outside on the street that night. She paused. Her voice cracked slightly, but she pushed through. Do you know what that dinner cost? I looked it up later. $350 per person. You were with a group of maybe 8 people. That's almost $3,000 for one dinner, while I was sitting outside trying to figure out where I could sleep safely. The audience was completely frozen. Some people had tears in their eyes. Others looked angry. Everyone was staring at Newsom. Vance let the moment breathe. Let Jennifer's words hang in the air. Then he spoke, his voice quiet but clear. Jennifer is one of 181,000 homeless people in California. That's 30% of all homeless people in the entire United States in one state. You've been governor for 7 years. You've spent, and I want everyone to hear this number, you've spent $24 billion on homelessness programs. $24 billion with a B. He paused. That's approximately $130,000 per homeless person. For that amount of money, you could have literally bought each homeless person in California a house in most American cities. Instead, Jennifer sleeps in doorways, and you walk past her on your way to $300 dinners. Vance turned to face Newsom directly. She's not a statistic, Governor. She's not a budget line item. She's a human being, a teacher who devoted 17 years to educating California's children. And your government failed her. Your programs failed her. Your $24 billion failed her. But more than that, you personally failed her. You saw her. You looked her in the eye. And you walked past her twice. The silence stretched out. 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 15 seconds. The longest silence in modern political television. Finally, Newsom spoke. His voice had lost its smooth confidence. It came out defensive, strained. This is ambush politics, using vulnerable people as political props. She's not a prop. Vance's voice cut through sharp now. She's your constituent. She lives in your state. She's been trying to get help from your programs for 3 years. She has every right to be here, every right to ask you why you walked past her. Newsom turned toward Jennifer, his face flushed. I'm deeply sorry for what you've been through, but I can't be expected to personally recognize and solve every individual person's situation. The words hung in the air, and everyone watching knew he just made a fatal mistake. Vance didn't even need to respond. The audience did it for him. Gasps, a few boos. Someone shouted, "Unbelievable!" Jennifer just stood there looking at Newsom with an expression that wasn't angry. It was worse. It was disappointed. Like she'd hoped for better and been proven wrong. Vance spoke quietly, deadly. "No one expects you to solve every individual problem personally, Governor, but we expect you not to walk past homeless people on your way to $300 dinners while claiming you're working day and night to help them. We expect you not to spend $24 billion and make the problem worse. And we expect you to have enough self-awareness to understand why Jennifer standing here right now telling this story to 40 million Americans is devastating to your credibility." He turned to the camera, to the millions watching at home. This is what happens when politicians stop seeing people and start seeing political problems to be managed. Jennifer isn't a problem. She's a person, a teacher, someone who contributed to society for years. And the government she paid taxes to, the state she served, abandoned her while the man running that state walked past her twice without a second thought. Newsom was shaking his head, his perfect hair slightly disheveled for the first time anyone could remember. "That's not fair." "Fair?" Vance's voice rose slightly. "Jennifer sleeping in doorways for 3 years isn't fair. You spending enough money to buy her a house 10 times over and not helping her isn't fair. You walking past her while she's homeless, while you're literally responsible for solving homelessness, that's not fair. Don't talk to me about fair." And everyone watching knew that Gavin Newsom's carefully constructed political image had just shattered into pieces on live television. But to understand how we got to this moment, how the Vice President of the United States came to Los Angeles with receipts, evidence, and a homeless teacher to systematically destroy a sitting governor's credibility, you have to go back. 2 hours earlier, when this started. 2 hours earlier, the green room backstage at the CNN studio in Los Angeles was buzzing with nervous energy. Gavin Newsom sat in a director's chair while a makeup artist touched up his foundation, making sure the harsh television lights wouldn't wash him out. His suit was custom-tailored navy blue that tested well with focus groups, probably cost $3,000. His hair was perfect. It was always perfect. Political operatives joked that Newsom's hair had better approval ratings than most senators. His communications director, Marcus Chen, paced the small room with a tablet running through final talking points. "Okay, remember the narrative. California leads the nation in innovation, in climate action, in progressive values. We're not perfect, but we're trying. Vance is going to attack from the right. Don't take the bait. Stay positive. Talk about the future, not the past." Newsom nodded absently, checking his phone, scrolling through Twitter, looking at the early commentary about tonight's forum. Most of the political class expected this to be a typical partisan food fight. Newsom defending California's record, Vance attacking it, both sides claiming victory afterwards. "Vance is going to come at you on homelessness," Marcus continued. "We know that's his opening. You pivot to investment. $24 billion shows commitment. It's a crisis decades in the making. Can't be solved overnight." "I've done this 1,000 times," Newsom said, not looking up from his phone. His voice had that casual confidence of someone who'd never really been challenged, who'd grown up wealthy, connected, privileged, who'd been in politics since his 20s and never lost. Mayor of San Francisco at 36. lieutenant governor. Governor for 7 years. Every step up had been easy, expected, inevitable. "Just don't let him rattle you," Marcus said. "He's going to try to make it personal. Stay above it." What Newsom didn't know, couldn't have known, was that 3 floors up, J.D. Vance was in a different green room having a very different kind of preparation session. Vance sat at a table completely covered with manila folders, color-coded tabs sticking out. Red for homelessness, blue for economy, green for crime, yellow for hypocrisy. Each folder was thick with documents, printouts, highlighted passages, annotated notes. This wasn't debate prep. This was a prosecution. His senior advisor, Sarah Martinez, stood at a whiteboard that had been brought in specifically for this. On it was a timeline. 2 hours broken into segments. Each segment had a topic and an objective. "First 20 minutes, establish the failures," Sarah said, pointing to the timeline. "Homelessness up 40% despite $24 billion spent. Housing costs through the roof. Middle-class exodus. You're not arguing policy preferences. You're documenting objective failure." Vance nodded, flipping through the red folder. Inside were charts, statistics, photographs. A tent encampment 2 blocks from the state capitol. A graph showing homelessness trends. A breakdown of where the $24 billion actually went. Consultants, environmental studies, bureaucracy. Less than 20% actually building housing. 20 to 40 minutes, the business exodus, Sarah continued. Oracle, Tesla, HP, 13,000 businesses left in 3 years. Not random, not coincidence, policy-driven. High taxes, over-regulation, hostile environment. The blue folder had corporate press releases, CEOs explaining why they were leaving, tax burden comparisons, regulatory compliance cost analyses, business climate rankings that put California dead last. 40 to 60 minutes, crime and quality of life, Sarah went on. Proposition 47, effectively legalizing theft. Videos of smash-and-grab robberies, store closures. He'll say crime is down. You show it's only down because they changed how they count it. The green folder had video links, news articles, police reports, evidence that couldn't be spun away. 60 to 90 minutes, the hypocrisy, Sarah said, tapping the yellow section. This is where you destroy his credibility. French laundry dinner during lockdown. Private jets while lecturing about climate. Kids in private school while opposing school choice. Living in a bubble while claiming to represent working people. Vance opened the yellow folder. Photos of Newsom at high-end restaurants. Flight manifests showing private jet usage. His kids' school tuition records, $40,000 per child per year. His house purchase records, $4 million in Pacific Heights. And then, Jennifer, Sarah said quietly, 90 minutes in, when he's already wounded, when his talking points are exhausted, when he's defensive, that's when we make it human. That's when we show what all these failures actually mean. Vance looked at a photo of Jennifer taken just last week. She was sitting on a sidewalk, her few possessions in a backpack beside her. She looked tired, used up, forgotten. "She's ready?" Vance asked. "She's ready. She knows her story, knows the dates, can prove she was there when she says she was. We've checked everything. It's airtight." Vance closed the folder, sat back. Newsom thinks this is going to be a normal political debate where we disagree about policy direction. He thinks he can smile and use his talking points and walk out looking gubernatorial. He looked at Sarah. "We're going to make him defend the indefensible. And we're going to do it with his own record. Nothing out of context, nothing twisted, just facts, just reality. Let him try to spin his way out of reality." At 5 o'clock Pacific time, both men were led to the stage. The CNN studio audience was filling in. About 300 people, carefully balanced, some Newsom supporters, some critics, some undecided voters CNN had recruited. The lights were bright. The cameras were positioned. Dana Bash reviewed her notes at the moderator's podium. Backstage, the two men waited in opposite wings. Newsom was joking with his staff, relaxed, confident. Vance was quiet, reviewing his notes one final time, mentally preparing for what he was about to do. At 5:15, they walked onto the stage. Newsom with his practiced smile and wave to the audience, Vance with a serious nod. They shook hands for the cameras, Newsom's grip firm and practiced, Vance's businesslike and brief. Then they took their positions at podiums about 15 feet apart. Dana Bash welcomed the television audience, explained the format. 2 hours, mix of direct exchanges and audience questions, topics ranging from homelessness to crime, to economy, to quality of life. She emphasized that this was meant to be substantive, civil, and focused on solutions. "We'll begin with opening statements," Dana said. "Governor Newsom, you have 3 minutes." Newsom stood from his stool. He always preferred to stand for important moments. Made him look taller, more commanding. "Thank you, Dana. Thank you to CNN. And thank you to everyone watching tonight. Look, I'm not going to stand here and tell you California is perfect. No state is. We face real challenges, challenges that affect real people every single day. But I want Americans to understand something. California isn't failing. California is leading." He hit his rhythm now, the smooth cadence of someone who'd given this speech 100 times. "We have the 5th largest economy in the world, larger than India, larger than the United Kingdom. We're home to the most innovative companies on Earth. The technology that powers your phones, your computers, your cars, it comes from California. Google, Apple, Tesla started here. The entertainment you watch, the food you eat, California produces more agriculture than any other state." He was warming up, gesturing now. "We've led the nation on climate change, on civil rights, on workers' protections, on healthcare access. When Washington was paralyzed by partisan gridlock, California acted. We've invested unprecedented resources in solving our challenges. $24 billion on homelessness. That shows commitment. That shows we're serious." He looked directly into the camera, the move his media coaches had drilled into him. "Yes, we have a homelessness crisis. It's real. It's visible. It breaks my heart every day. But this is a crisis that took decades to develop. It can't be solved overnight. It requires sustained investment, compassion, and evidence-based solutions. That's what we're doing." He paused for effect. "I believe in California. I believe in its people. I believe in its values. I believe we're showing America what's possible when you have the courage to tackle big problems with big solutions, when you put people over politics, when you lead with your values instead of following the polls." A final gesture, open-handed, sincere-looking. That's what tonight should be about. Not tearing down, not playing political games, but having an honest conversation about how we build a better future for California, for America, for all of us. Scattered applause from the left side of the audience. Newsom sat back on his stool, looking satisfied. He'd hit all his marks, set the tone he wanted, positioned himself as the optimistic leader with a vision. Dana Bash nodded. "Vice President Vance, your opening statement." Vance stood slowly. No theatrical movements, no practiced gestures, just stood and looked across at Newsom with an expression that was hard to read, not angry, not smug, just serious, like a lawyer about to present evidence in a case he knew he'd win. "Governor Newsom, I appreciate your optimism. I really do. Optimism is good. Hope is good. But let's talk about reality, not talking points, not spin. Reality. His voice was calm, but there was steel underneath it. The Appalachian accent was subtle, but present. This wasn't a slick coastal politician. This was someone who'd grown up in a different world, who'd seen what happened when industries collapsed and communities died. You said California's economy is the 5th largest in the world. That's true. It's also true that in the past 3 years, California lost 800,000 residents. Net more people leaving than arriving. For the first time in California's 170-year history. People don't leave success stories, Governor. They leave failures. He pulled a small note card from his jacket pocket. You said you've invested $24 billion in homelessness. Also true. It's also true that during your time as governor, homelessness in California increased by 40%. You spent $24 billion and made the problem worse. That's not investment. That's waste. He glanced at the card, then back at Newsom. You talked about California leading on climate change. You also took 41 private jet flights last year. Your carbon footprint from just those flights is more than what 50 average Californians produce in a year. You lecture people about driving SUVs while you fly private everywhere. That's not leadership. That's hypocrisy. Newsom was shaking his head, but Vance kept going. You mentioned California's innovation economy. You didn't mention that Tesla moved its headquarters to Texas, or that Oracle moved to Texas, or that Hewlett-Packard moved to Texas, or that 13,000 businesses have left California in the past 3 years. Why are the companies you're so proud of leaving? He put the note card away. You said you believe in California's values. So do I. California should be the greatest state in America. Perfect weather, natural beauty, innovative people, natural resources. It has everything going for it. Everything except competent governance. His voice got quieter, more intense. You've been governor for 7 years. You've had a Democratic supermajority in the legislature, massive budgets, no meaningful opposition. You've had unlimited power to implement your vision. And what's happened? Housing costs up 50%. Gas prices highest in the nation. Crime surging. Schools failing. Middle class fleeing. Homelessness exploding. He paused. At some point, Governor, you have to stop blaming everyone else and look in the mirror. You've had every advantage, every resource, every opportunity, and you've failed. Not in the ways that politicians usually fail, getting outmaneuvered, losing votes, having to compromise. You failed in the most basic way possible, making things worse instead of better. He turned to face the audience. Tonight, I'm going to walk through California's failures in detail. Not because I want to tear down California. I love California. My wife and I got married there. But because the people of California deserve accountability. They deserve to know where their money went, why their lives got harder, why the promises didn't match reality. Back to Newsom. You've had your chance, Governor. 7 years. It didn't work. Maybe it's time to admit that and try something different. Dead silence in the audience. No applause, no reaction, just the weight of what had been said. Dana Bash looked between them, recognizing this was going to be different than the typical political debate. Let's begin with our first topic, homelessness and housing. This is clearly the most visible crisis in California. Governor Newsom, you mentioned the $24 billion. Walk us through what that money has accomplished. And with that question, the real debate began. Not the theatrical opening statements, but the detailed examination of failure. Round by round, topic by topic. each one building on the last, each one making it harder for Newsom to maintain his narrative. This wasn't going to be a draw where both sides claimed victory. This was going to be a demolition, piece by piece, claim by claim, until there was nothing left but the gap between rhetoric and reality. Newsom stood from his stool, ready for this topic. He'd known it was coming. His team had prepared him. Look, the $24 billion represents the most comprehensive investment in addressing homelessness that any state has ever made. We're building housing. We're providing services. We're taking a holistic approach. How many housing units have you built? Vance interrupted. Not rudely, just factually, like a prosecutor asking a question he already knew the answer to. We've built thousands of units of permanent supportive housing. How many thousands specifically? Newsom hesitated. I don't have the exact number at my fingertips. I do. Vance pulled out his first folder. Red tab, opened it. In the 7 years you've been governor, California has built approximately 18,000 units of permanent supportive housing specifically for homeless individuals. 1,000 units. That sounds good, until you do the math. He pulled out a document, held it up so the audience could see. $24 billion divided by 18,000 units equals $1.3 million per unit. Governor, you spent more than $1 million per apartment to house homeless people. The audience stirred. That number didn't sound right. It couldn't be right. Vance continued. For context, the median home price in California is $800,000. You could have bought every homeless person in California an actual house for less than what you spent per supportive housing unit. How is that possible? Newsom was already going defensive. Housing production involves complex factors: construction costs, environmental review, land acquisition. Let's talk about that. Vance pulled out another document. This is a case study from the Los Angeles Times. A supportive housing project in downtown LA, 80 units. Want to know how much they spent on environmental impact reports before breaking ground? He didn't wait. $4.2 million on environmental reports for a building in downtown Los Angeles that was going on a parking lot. $4.2 million in consultant fees, studies, and bureaucratic process before a single homeless person got housed. He pulled out more papers. The San Francisco Chronicle did an investigation last year. They found that in San Francisco, the average cost of building one unit of supportive housing is $750,000 in construction costs alone. Why? Because of permit fees, impact fees, union requirements, prevailing wage laws, environmental mandates. You've created a system where it costs $750,000 to build one apartment. Newsom tried to respond. We have important protections in place. Important protections that make housing homeless people impossibly expensive. Do you know what it costs to build an apartment in Houston? $90,000. In Nashville, $120,000. In Dallas, $140,000. You're spending 5 to 6 times more than other cities to build the exact same thing. That's not protection. That's waste. Vance was just getting started. And that's just the money that actually went to housing. Want to know where the rest went? He pulled out a pie chart, held it up. This is from the California State Auditor's report on homelessness spending. Of the $24 billion, only 37% went to actual housing construction or rental assistance. 37%. Where did the other $15 billion go? He pointed to the chart. Administration, $5 billion. Consultants and studies, $3 billion. Services and programs, meaning salaries for caseworkers, counselors, coordinators, $4 billion. Facilities and infrastructure, meaning offices for the people running the programs, 2 billion. Unaccounted or unspecified, 1 billion. He looked up at Newsom. You've created a homelessness industrial complex. Thousands of people employed in nonprofits, government agencies, consulting firms, all making good salaries, managing the homelessness crisis. But the actual homeless population keeps growing because the system isn't designed to solve homelessness. It's designed to manage it, to sustain itself, to keep the grant money flowing. The audience was completely silent now. These weren't partisan talking points. These were numbers, facts, documentation. Newsom's face was flushed. That's a gross oversimplification. Is it? Vance pulled out a newspaper article. This is from the San Francisco Chronicle last year. They profiled a nonprofit called Home First Solutions. The executive director makes $340,000 a year. His top 5 staffers each make over $200,000. The organization manages 3 supportive housing facilities with a total of 200 beds. 7 administrators making a combined $1.5 million to manage 200 beds. That's $7,500 in administrative salary per homeless person housed. Does that sound like efficient use of taxpayer money? He didn't wait for an answer. The California Homeless Services Authority, a state agency you created, has 137 employees. Average salary, $110,000. Total payroll, $15 million a year. How many homeless people do they directly house? 0. They're administrators, coordinating, managing, studying, while people sleep on the streets. Vance looked at the audience. This is what happens when government throws money at a problem without accountability, without results-based metrics. The money gets absorbed by bureaucracy and well-meaning but ineffective programs, and the problem gets worse. Back to Newsom. You've been governor for 7 years. Homelessness has increased 40%. You've spent more money than most countries' entire GDP, and it got worse. At what point do you admit the approach isn't working? Newsom tried to pivot. Housing and homelessness are complex, multi-generational issues. Let's talk about something simple then, Vance said, cutting him off. Let's talk about November 6, 2020. Where were you that night? Newsom's face tightened. He knew exactly where this was going. I don't recall specific dates from. Let me refresh your memory. November 6, 2020. You were at the French Laundry restaurant in Napa Valley. 3 Michelin stars, one of the most expensive restaurants in America. You were there for a birthday party. Vance pulled out photographs. This is you inside the restaurant at a table with 12 other people. Indoors, maskless, no social distancing, having dinner. The photos appeared on the monitors around the audience. Clear images of Newsom at a fancy restaurant, laughing, glass of wine in hand, surrounded by people. No masks, no distancing. Want to know what's interesting about November 6, 2020? Vance's voice was calm but cutting. That was during your strictest lockdown. You had banned indoor dining across all of California, completely banned. Restaurants couldn't serve people inside. Thousands of restaurants were going bankrupt. Owners were losing everything. He paused. You also told Californians not to gather with people outside their households. No birthday parties, no family dinners. You specifically said, and I have the clip, that gathering for holidays or celebrations was too dangerous. Remember that? Newsom opened his mouth, but Vance kept going. So, while you were telling restaurant owners they couldn't serve customers, while you were telling families they couldn't have Thanksgiving dinner together, while you were destroying people's livelihoods and mental health with your lockdown orders, you were at a fancy restaurant inside, maskless, with 11 other people celebrating. He pulled out a receipt. Want to know what that dinner cost? The table's bill was $15,400, including wine pairings. $15,000, while restaurant owners across California were filing for bankruptcy because you wouldn't let them operate. The audience was murmuring now, some people looking disgusted, others shaking their heads. "And who paid for that dinner?" Vance asked. "Who picked up the $15,000 tab while you were deciding which California businesses could survive and which had to die?" He pulled out another document. The California Medical Association, a lobbying group. They paid for your dinner. You were there with their lobbyists, making decisions about their issues, while they bought you $15,000 worth of food and wine. Newsom tried to respond. "I've apologized for that dinner multiple times." "You apologized for getting caught. Let's be clear about what happened. Someone leaked photos. The story broke. You went on TV and said you made a mistake. But the mistake wasn't the lockdowns. The mistake wasn't the hypocrisy. The mistake was not being more careful about being photographed." Vance's voice got harder. 2 weeks after that dinner, 2 weeks, you signed legislation favorable to the California Medical Association. Legislation they'd been lobbying for. Coincidence? I've never let personal relationships influence policy decisions. You took a $15,000 dinner from lobbyists and then signed their bill. That's not a personal relationship. That's corruption. Legal corruption, maybe, but corruption. Vance turned to the camera. This is what bothers people. Not that politicians are imperfect, but the complete lack of self-awareness. You shut down restaurants, destroyed businesses, told families they couldn't see each other for Thanksgiving. Then you went to the fanciest restaurant in the state for a $15,000 lobbyist dinner, and you thought that was okay. Back to Newsom. You didn't think about the restaurant owner who just filed for bankruptcy. You didn't think about the family who couldn't visit their elderly parents for the holidays. You didn't think about the workers who had been laid off because of your orders. You thought about yourself, your friends, your lobbyists. Because rules are for other people, not for you. Before Newsom could recover, Vance moved to the next attack. Let's talk about climate change. You've positioned yourself as a climate leader. You want to ban gas cars by 2035. You've passed aggressive emissions targets. You lecture people constantly about their carbon footprint. Climate change is an existential threat. Then why did you take 41 private jet flights last year? Vance pulled out flight manifests. 41 private flights. I have the records, tail numbers, departure and arrival times, destinations, all of them. He started reading. January 15, 2024. Sacramento to Los Angeles, 1-hour flight, private jet. There's commercial flights every hour. You chose private. January 22nd, Los Angeles to San Francisco, 45-minute flight, private jet. Again, commercial flights constantly available. February 8th, Sacramento to San Diego, private jet. He looked up. You flew private from Sacramento to San Diego. That's a 6-hour drive or a 1-hour commercial flight. You took a private jet. Want to guess the carbon emissions from a private jet flight versus commercial? He didn't wait. A private jet uses about 5 to 7 times more fuel per passenger than a commercial flight. Your carbon footprint from just your jet flights last year was approximately 200 tons of CO2. The average American produces about 16 tons per year. Your private jet habit alone produced as much carbon as 12 average Americans produce in an entire year. The math was damning, simple, undeniable. Newsom tried to deflect. Security requirements and time constraints necessitate. Security requirements? Vance's voice was skeptical. You're a governor, not the president. You don't need private jets for security. You want them for convenience, for luxury, because you can. He pulled out more records. My favorite is June 2024. You flew private from Sacramento to San Francisco to speak at a climate conference. A climate conference, Governor, about reducing emissions. You flew private 90 miles to tell people they need to reduce their carbon footprint. Audience laughter. Uncomfortable laughter, but laughter. The jet fuel you burned getting to that conference produced more emissions than 50 Californians commuting to work for a month. Do you see the irony? Do you see why people think you're full of it? Newsom's voice rose. This is cherry-picking isolated incidents. 41 flights in 1 year isn't isolated. It's a pattern. It's a lifestyle. You live in luxury while demanding sacrifice from everyone else. You fly private while telling middle-class families they need to buy $60,000 electric cars they can't afford. You produce the carbon footprint of 12 people while lecturing everyone else about using too much energy. Vance pulled out a photo. This is you getting off a private jet in Los Angeles, August 2024. You were going to a fundraiser. You could have flown commercial. You could have driven it 6 hours. But you took a private jet because your time is valuable. Your comfort matters. But everyone else? They can take the bus. Vance shifted gears again, not giving Newsom any time to recover. Let's talk about education. You're a big supporter of public schools, right? You fought against school choice. You've opposed voucher programs. You say every child deserves a quality public education. I believe strongly in public education. Where do your kids go to school? Silence. Long, painful silence. Governor, where do your 4 children attend school? Newsom's voice was tight. That's a personal family matter. It's a public matter when you're making education policy. Where do they go? They attend a private school in Marin County. Thank you for your honesty. And how much does that private school cost per year? I don't see how that's relevant. How much, Governor? Newsom looked at his communications director in the front row, looked at Dana Bash, looked anywhere but at Vance. Finally, approximately $40,000 per child. $40,000, Vance repeated. You have 4 children. That's $160,000 per year in private school tuition, more than the average California teacher makes in a year. You're spending more on private school than most families make in total income. He pulled out California education statistics. California ranks 37th in the nation for reading proficiency, 40th in math proficiency. Your public schools are failing. You know they're failing. That's why your kids don't go there. Newsom tried to interrupt, but Vance raised his voice slightly. You oppose school choice programs that would give poor families vouchers to send their kids to private schools. You vetoed school choice bills. You fought against charter schools. Why? Because teachers' unions donate millions to your campaigns. So you protect their monopoly on failing schools. He looked directly at Newsom. But your kids don't suffer. They go to a $40,000 a year school with small class sizes, experienced teachers, excellent facilities. They'll be fine. It's other people's kids who are trapped in failing schools. Other people's kids who can't read at grade level. Other people's kids whose futures are being destroyed by the system you protect. That's not fair, Newsom started. You keep saying that. What's not fair is that you have choices, and you deny those same choices to families who need them more than you do. What's not fair is spending $160,000 a year on private school while fighting against giving a poor family in Oakland a $10,000 voucher. Vance pulled out testimonials. I talked to parents in South LA. Their kids are stuck in schools where 30% of students can't read at grade level. Those parents want the same choice you made. They want to send their kids somewhere better. You won't let them, because protecting the teachers' union matters more than protecting children. Let's talk about the people leaving California, Vance said, pulling out yet another folder. In the past 3 years, California lost a net 800,000 residents. Not people moving within California, people leaving the state entirely. Why? Newsom tried his prepared answer. Population fluctuations are normal. People move for various reasons. 800,000 people. That's not fluctuation. That's exodus. And it's not random. Let's talk about who's leaving. Vance pulled out demographic data. Middle-class families, young professionals, small business owners, retirees, the people who built California, the people who made it work. They're leaving. And you know who's replacing them? The very wealthy who can afford California's costs, and the very poor who qualify for California's services. The middle is being hollowed out. He showed charts on the monitors. Median income families, people making between $50,000 and $150,000 a year, are leaving California at twice the rate of other income groups. Why? Because they can't afford to live there anymore. Housing costs up 50% in 7 years. Gas prices highest in the nation. Electricity rates second highest. Car insurance most expensive. Grocery costs 30% above national average. Tax burden highest in the nation. You've created a state where if you're a billionaire, it's fine. If you're poor, you get benefits. But if you're middle class trying to raise a family, you're being crushed. Newsom tried to respond. We're making investments in affordability. You've been making those investments for 7 years. It's gotten worse, not better. How long before you admit your investments aren't working? Vance pulled out corporate press releases. Oracle moved its headquarters to Texas, announced in December 2020. Why'd they leave? CEO Larry Ellison said, and I quote, California's business climate has become untenable. The regulations, the taxes, the costs make it impossible to grow. Tesla, Elon Musk moved the headquarters to Texas in 2021, said California had become complacent and entitled. Hewlett-Packard, founded in California in 1939, moved to Texas in 2010. These aren't startups. These are iconic California companies that gave up on California. He listed more. In the past 3 years, 13,000 businesses have left California or closed. 13,000. Not locations, entire businesses, taking hundreds of thousands of jobs with them. You want to know why? I'll tell you why. He pulled out tax comparisons. The Tax Foundation ranks California dead last, 50th out of 50 states for business tax climate. Dead last. The top marginal income tax rate is 13.3%, highest in the nation. Corporate tax rate, 9.6%. Add federal taxes, and successful businesses in California are paying over 50% of their income in taxes. But it's not just taxes, it's regulations. California has more regulations than any other state. Environmental regulations, labor regulations, safety regulations, building codes, permitting requirements. It takes an average of 7 years to get approval to build an apartment building in San Francisco. 7 years. In Texas, it takes 18 months. Vance's voice got passionate. You've made it impossibly expensive and impossibly complicated to do business in California. So, businesses leave. And then you act surprised and blame Republicans or corporations or whoever. But it's your policies, your decisions, your governance. Crime, Vance said, pulling out his last major folder. You've said repeatedly that crime in California is down, that your criminal justice reforms are working. Is that true? Newsom jumped on this. Overall crime statistics show that California's crime rate is below the national average. Because you changed how you count crime. Vance's voice was sharp. Proposition 47, passed in 2014, made theft under $950 a misdemeanor instead of a felony. And you know what happened? Stores stopped reporting thefts under $950 because nothing happens. No arrests, no prosecution. So it doesn't show up in your statistics, but the crime is very, very real. He pulled out his phone, connected it to the monitors. I'm going to show you some videos. These are all from the past year, all from California. The first video played a Walgreens in San Francisco. A man calmly walking down the aisles filling a large garbage bag with products: shampoo, toothpaste, deodorant, razors. A security guard watched him, did nothing. The man walked out with a full bag. That security guard isn't allowed to stop him. Company policy, because it's not worth the liability. The police won't come. The DA won't prosecute. So thieves just walk in and take whatever they want. Another video. A group of people with hammers smashing jewelry store display cases, grabbing merchandise, running out to waiting cars. Smash and grab robberies up 700% in Los Angeles County. 700%. But they don't always show up in your statistics because stores have stopped reporting them. More videos. People running out of stores with armfuls of clothes. Shoplifters filling shopping carts and pushing them right out the door. Store employees just watching, helpless. Walgreens has closed 17 stores in San Francisco because of theft. CVS closed 12. Target closed 3 major stores. Not because they're not profitable, because they can't control the theft. The losses are too high. Vance looked up from his phone. You've made theft effectively legal, and you're surprised people are stealing. Newsom was shaking his head vigorously. Those are isolated incidents being amplified by conservative media. There are thousands of these videos online. Thousands, posted by the thieves themselves. They post them on TikTok and Instagram because they know nothing will happen. They're bragging about it. He pulled out crime statistics. But let's talk about violent crime. The crime you can't just not report. Murders in Los Angeles up 32% since 2019. Carjackings up 84%. Aggravated assault up 41%. These are FBI statistics, not media spin. Real numbers. Property crime in San Francisco up 56%. Burglary up 49%. Motor vehicle theft up 71%. But you stand there and say crime is down because you've changed the definitions and stopped counting things. Vance's voice rose. People don't feel safe in California's cities anymore. They see the videos, they read the news, they know people who've been victimized. You can manipulate statistics all you want. You can claim crime is down. But people living in LA, San Francisco, Oakland, Sacramento, they know better. They see it every day. This is what happens when you prioritize criminals over victims. When you focus on root causes instead of actual justice. When you let people out without bail and refuse to prosecute crimes, you've created an environment where crime is tolerated, even encouraged, and law-abiding citizens suffer. Newsom tried to defend his record. We've focused on evidence-based criminal justice reform. Evidence-based? Vance's voice was incredulous. The evidence is that crime went up, way up. The evidence is that stores are closing, that people are being victimized, that criminals know they can get away with it. What more evidence do you need that your reforms failed? He pulled out a news article. This is from the San Francisco Chronicle last month. They interviewed 20 small business owners in the Tenderloin district. All 20 said they'd been robbed multiple times. 15 said they'd reported it to police and nothing happened. 8 said they're considering closing their businesses because the theft is too much. That's your evidence-based reform, destroying small businesses. Vance closed his folders, looked at Newsom. His voice got quieter, more serious. Governor, we've talked for 2 hours about policy failures, about statistics, about programs that don't work, and money that got wasted, about the gap between your rhetoric and your reality, about your hypocrisy. He paused. But I want to end with something more important than statistics. I want to talk about the human cost of your failures, the real people whose lives have been made worse by your policies. He nodded toward the audience. There's someone here tonight who has a story to tell, and I think you should hear it. That's when Jennifer stood up. And everything that had come before, all the statistics, all the arguments, all the policy debates, suddenly became real, became human, became impossible to spin away. Jennifer stood slowly in row 7, her hands trembling slightly. The camera found her immediately, her face filling the monitors around the hall. She looked exhausted, used up, but also determined, like she'd been carrying something heavy for years and was finally ready to set it down. Governor Newsom, her voice was quiet at first, but the microphones caught every word. You don't know me, but I know you. Newsom's face had already arranged itself into his empathy expression. The concerned eyes, the slight head tilt, the practiced look of compassion. I'm so sorry for whatever you're going through. I used to live 3 blocks from your house. Jennifer's voice got stronger, cutting through his reflexive sympathy. Pacific Heights, Filbert Street, beautiful neighborhood. I was a teacher, 5th grade at Monroe Elementary in the Sunset District. I taught for 17 years. I loved those kids more than anything. She paused, gathering herself. When COVID hit in 2020, I got furloughed. Budget cuts. The district said it was temporary. It wasn't. In 2021, they laid me off permanently. I tried to find another teaching job. Nobody was hiring. I burned through my savings. I couldn't pay rent. By 2022, I was evicted. I ended up on the streets. The audience was completely silent now. Every eye on Jennifer, every camera on her face. I've been homeless in San Francisco for 3.5 years. Her voice cracked slightly, but she pushed through. I've tried to get help. I've gone to the shelters you talk about. They're full or they're dangerous. I've been assaulted in shelters, had my things stolen. I stopped going. I've called the hotlines, filled out applications for housing assistance. They tell me there are waiting lists, 2 years long, 3 years long. Keep checking back, they say. Meanwhile, I sleep in doorways. I've been beaten up twice on the street. Everything I owned has been stolen at least 4 times. Last winter, I got pneumonia. I almost died. A free clinic saved my life. She looked directly at Newsom now, her eyes locked on his. And you walked past me twice. I wasn't invisible, Governor. You saw me. Newsom opened his mouth, but nothing came out. His practiced expressions had all disappeared. He just looked stunned. The first time was November last year. Evening, maybe 7 o'clock. I was sleeping in a doorway on your street, Filbert Street. You came out of your house. You were dressed up. Nice suit. You were on your phone talking to someone, laughing. You walked right past me. We made eye contact for maybe 1 second. You looked at me. You saw me. And then you stepped around me and kept walking. Got into a black car and drove away. The audience was frozen. Some people had tears in their eyes. The second time was 2 weeks later. I'd taken the bus up to Napa. Someone told me there was a shelter with openings. There wasn't. I was sitting on the sidewalk in Yountville. It was evening, and I saw you getting out of a car near a restaurant, the French Laundry. I recognized you immediately." Her voice got stronger. "You were with a group of people, maybe 8 or 9, all dressed up, laughing, having a good time. You walked right past me. You were maybe 10 feet away. You glanced at me, just a quick look, and kept walking. You all went into that restaurant, and I sat there on that sidewalk trying to figure out where I was going to sleep that night." She paused, wiped her eyes. "Do you know what that dinner costs at the French Laundry? I looked it up later at the library. $350 per person. You were with 8 people. That's almost $3,000 for one dinner, while I was sitting outside trying to figure out how to survive the night." The silence in the hall was suffocating, heavy, painful. "I'm not telling you this to make you feel bad," Jennifer said. "I'm telling you because I want you to understand something. You spent $24 billion on homelessness. That's what Vice President Vance said. 24 billion. I'm one of the homeless people that money was supposed to help, and it never reached me. Not once in 3.5 years has anyone from your programs helped me." Her voice rose slightly. "So, where did the money go? Because it didn't go to me. It didn't go to the other homeless people I know on the streets. We're still out there, still sleeping in doorways, still getting beaten up and robbed and sick, still trying to survive while you spend billions and walk past us on your way to fancy dinners." Vance let the moment breathe. Let Jennifer's words settle over the audience, over Newsom, over the millions watching at home. Then he spoke, his voice quiet but clear. "Jennifer is one of 181,000 homeless people in California, 30% of all homeless people in the entire United States in one state. Governor, you've been in office for 7 years. You've spent $24 billion and homelessness increased by 40%. Jennifer is the result of your policies, the human cost of your failures." He paused. "She's not a statistic. She's not a political problem to be managed. She's a human being. A teacher who devoted 17 years to educating California's children, who paid taxes, who contributed to society, and when she needed help, your government abandoned her. Your programs failed her. Your $24 billion failed her." Vance's voice got harder. "But worse than that, you personally failed her. You saw her not once, but twice. You looked her in the eye, and you walked past her on your way to dinner, on your way to live your life, while she had nowhere to go." He turned to face Newsom directly. "She's not a prop, Governor. She's your constituent. She lives in your city. She tried to access your programs. She deserves answers, so answer her. Why did you walk past her? Why didn't your $24 billion help her? Why is she still on the streets?" All eyes turned to Newsom. His face was flushed, his perfect composure completely shattered. When he spoke, his voice came out defensive, strained. I'm deeply sorry for what you've been through, truly. But I can't be expected to personally recognize and solve every individual person's—" He stopped, realized what he just said, tried to recover. "What I mean is—" But it was too late. The damage was done. The audience gasped. Someone booed. Jennifer just stood there looking at him with an expression that wasn't anger. It was disappointment, like she'd hoped for better and been proven wrong. Vance didn't need to say anything. Newsom had just sealed his own fate. But he spoke anyway, his voice quiet and devastating. "No one expects you to personally solve every problem, Governor, but we expect you not to walk past homeless people on your way to $300 dinners while claiming you're working to help them. We expect you not to spend $24 billion and make the problem worse. We expect you to have enough awareness to understand why Jennifer's standing here right now telling this story to 40 million Americans is the end of your credibility. He looked at the camera, at the millions watching. This is what happens when politicians lose sight of what they're supposed to be doing, when they start caring more about their image than about results, when they stop seeing people and start seeing political problems. Jennifer isn't a problem. She's a person, and she deserved better than being walked past twice by the man who's supposed to be solving homelessness. Back to Newsom. You've had unlimited power, unlimited money, unlimited time, and you made things worse. Jennifer is living proof. She's the human cost of your failure, and no amount of spin can change that. Dana Bash tried to regain control. Governor Newsom, would you like to respond? Newsom looked lost, trapped. His voice came out weak. I don't recall those specific encounters. I interact with thousands of people. But if I walked past you, I sincerely apologize. The homelessness crisis is extraordinarily complex. We're working every day to address it through comprehensive, evidence-based approaches. You've been working on it for 7 years, Vance interrupted. It got worse, 40% worse. You haven't solved it. You haven't slowed it. You've made it worse while spending more money than most countries' entire budgets. He gestured toward Jennifer. She doesn't need your apology for walking past her. She needs housing. She needs the programs you promised. She needs the $24 billion to actually reach people instead of getting absorbed by bureaucracy and consultants. But you can't give her that because your system doesn't work. Jennifer sat down slowly, exhausted. Several people in the audience were crying. Others looked angry. The energy in the room had completely changed. What had started as a policy debate had become something much more personal, much more real. Dana Bash tried to move on. We are coming to the end of our time. I'd like to give both of you a chance for closing statements. Governor Newsom. Newsom stood trying to gather himself, trying to find some way to recover, but his usual confidence was gone. His voice lacked its typical smooth cadence. Tonight, you've heard a lot of criticism, a lot of cherry-picked statistics taken out of context. Yes, California faces challenges, real challenges, but we're addressing them with unprecedented investment and bold, progressive policies. Change takes time. Solutions are complex. We're committed to doing better, to helping people like Jennifer, to making California work for everyone. It was weak, and he knew it. Generic platitudes that rang hollow after everything that had been presented. After Jennifer's testimony, he sat back down looking defeated. Vice President Vance, your closing statement. Vance stood, looked out at the audience, then at the cameras. Governor Newsom keeps saying California's problems are complex, that solutions take time, that more investment is needed. But here's the truth. California's problems aren't complex. They're the result of bad governance, of policies that don't work, of priorities that are upside down. He ticked points off on his fingers. Housing is expensive because you've made it impossible to build. Homelessness is up because you spend money on bureaucracy instead of actual housing. Crime is up because you don't prosecute criminals. Businesses are leaving because you've made California hostile to business. The middle class is fleeing because they can't afford to live there. These aren't complex problems. They're the predictable results of your choices. And you've had 7 years to fix them. 7 years of unlimited power, and you made everything worse. His voice got quieter, more intense. But worse than the policy failures is the disconnect. You live in a $4 million house. You fly private jets. You send your kids to $40,000 a year schools. You have 300 dinners. You live in luxury while the state you govern falls apart. You walked past Jennifer twice. That's not a partisan attack. That's a fact. She was there. You were there. You saw her and kept walking. Because homeless people aren't real to you. They're statistics, talking points, budget items, not human beings. He paused. Let that sink in. California deserves better. Its people deserve better. They deserve leaders who see them, who care about results more than image, who live by the same rules they impose on everyone else, who actually solve problems instead of making them worse while collecting good press. He looked at Newsom one final time. You've had your chance, Governor. 7 years. It didn't work. Maybe it's time for California to try something different. And with that, the forum ended. No applause, no boos, just silence. The heavy silence of an audience that had just witnessed something they'd never seen before. A complete and total dismantling of a political figure. Not with personal attacks or cheap shots, but with facts, with evidence, with the gap between rhetoric and reality laid bare for everyone to see. Newsom walked off the stage without shaking hands. His team surrounded him immediately, probably already working on damage control, calling media allies, drafting responses. But everyone watching knew it was hopeless. You can't recover from this. You can't spin your way out of walking past a homeless woman on your way to a luxury dinner while spending billions, supposedly, to help her. The clips started spreading before the forum even ended. Audience members had been recording on their phones. By the time Newsom left the building, Jennifer's testimony had already been viewed 5 million times on Twitter. By midnight, it was 20 million. By morning, it was 40 million. The moment where Newsom said, "I can't be expected to solve every individual person's problem," was clipped, shared, memed, analyzed. His tone, his defensiveness, the look on Jennifer's face, it became the defining moment of the night, of his career. Conservative media ran with it immediately. Gavin Newsom's "let them eat cake" moment was the headline everywhere. But it wasn't just conservative outlets. CNN's own panel looked shell-shocked. "I've covered politics for 20 years, one analyst said. "I've never seen anything like that." The Jennifer moment was devastating. The Atlantic ran a piece titled, "When Progressive Rhetoric Collides with Reality." The New York Times editorial board wrote, "California's Reckoning." Even MSNBC, typically friendly to Democrats, couldn't defend it. Newsom didn't have answers, one panelist admitted. When you've spent $24 billion and made homelessness worse, what can you say? The polls came quickly. Newsom's approval rating in California dropped 9 points in 4 days. Among Democrats nationally, he'd been positioning himself for a future presidential run. He dropped 15 points. But more devastating was the favorability collapse among his core supporters, progressive activists, young voters, the people who'd believed in him. They felt betrayed. "We told him the programs weren't working," one homeless advocate told NPR. "We told him the money was being wasted. He didn't listen. He just wanted to spend billions and get credit for caring. He never actually wanted to solve the problem." The California recall movement, which had been struggling to gain traction, suddenly exploded. Within a week, they'd gathered 300,000 new signatures. Within 2 weeks, they had enough to trigger another recall election. Jennifer became a national figure. Good Morning America, 60 Minutes, The Joe Rogan Experience. She told her story calmly, without embellishment. Didn't need to. The truth was damning enough. Vance's team connected her with private charities and community organizations, not government programs. Within 3 weeks, she had temporary housing. Within 6 weeks, she had a job helping other homeless people navigate the system. She became an advocate, speaking about what actually works versus what sounds good in press releases. "The money's there," she told one interviewer, $24 billion, but it's trapped in a system designed to sustain itself, not to help people. We need to tear it down and start over. Focus on actually housing people, not on employing consultants and administrators. As for Newsom, he tried to recover, gave interviews defending his record, issued statements about misunderstandings and context, but he couldn't escape the video, couldn't escape Jennifer's face, couldn't escape his own words. By December, rumors spread that he wouldn't seek re-election. His team denied it, but major donors were pulling back. The whispers in Democratic circles got louder. He's finished. The recall election was set for March 2026. Early polls showed him losing by double digits. The man who'd seemed destined for the presidency was now fighting to survive as governor. And it all came down to one moment. One woman. One simple, devastating truth. He'd walked past a homeless teacher on his way to a $300 dinner while spending billions supposedly to help people like her. You can survive policy disagreements. You can survive political attacks. You can survive bad press cycles. But you can't survive being exposed as fundamentally disconnected from the people you're supposed to serve. You can't survive having your hypocrisy laid bare in front of 40 million people by someone whose life your failures destroyed. Gavin Newsom learned that lesson the hardest way possible. In a forum he'd agreed to thinking he'd defend his record. In front of cameras he'd sought out thinking they'd showcase his leadership. Instead, they captured his political death. The moment when the perfect hair and the practiced talking points and the smooth delivery all proved worthless because he couldn't answer the simplest question. If you've had all this power and all this money, why are people like Jennifer still sleeping in doorways? He had no answer, and everyone watching knew it. That's how political careers end. Not with scandals or resignations, with viral moments and devastating silences, with truths that can't be spun away. Gavin Newsom had his moment of truth, and it destroyed him.